Hello everyone. Now that we know that rabbits can also be bears, let's look into one of the other types of bears, blue bears, or magical blue bears as they are better known. I will show you the page in the companion guide. Gives you a little bit of an idea of their likes, dislikes, personality and appearance. You'll be thinking, appearance, could they be blue by any chance? Yes, indeed they could. And they are bears who are extremely proud of their colour. If you meet a blue bear, you definitely have to make some sort of comment about their colour. A sort of safe bet would be, oh my goodness, how blue you're looking today. Oh, that white background, very apt for today's story. That white background really shows off your colour. It's the way to a blue bear's heart, really. That and high tea, because every bear in the bear dimension appreciates afternoon tea. It is one of their favourite things. So, blue bear's personality can be rather naughty. You will often find them up to mischief or dreaming up a cunning plan, so watch out for that. They aren't vain, but they do like to hear you're looking very blue today, ideally every day. But they are vain. I have to say that. I've got a blue bear sitting here. He's a little bit too big for the camera, but he is sitting here to make sure that the word gets out, because it's important to know how to treat a blue bear if you want to keep them here. So appearance, yes, they will always be blue. You will often find them staring into space, thinking up clever ideas or remembering past adventures. So don't make the mistake of thinking, oh, there's no anima in there. They could be deep in thought or daydreaming. Likes. Poking their large blue noses into other bears' business. They always like to know what's going on. That is very true, actually. And you'll find that in the story of the small helping bears, which I went over in another video. But there is a large blue bear, a very old, very wise blue bear, who lives in the forest. And it's very important that he does, in fact, poke his large blue nose into other people's business. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing. Dislikes. Sitting on blue chairs, as this means their wonderful colour doesn't stand out. A blue bear always wants to stand out, unless he's hiding, of course. Which brings us back to Blue Bear's story. Blue Ted winked at his reflection in the mirror. "Here's looking at blue," he said with a smile. He was very proud of his colour and the magical abilities that came with it. Although he didn't have as much magic as his ancestors, it was enough to allow him to get up to all sorts of mischief. And he usually was up to mischief, in some form or another. Today, though, Blue Ted had no particular plans. He thought he might take a stroll down the street to see if he met anyone important. That was the good thing about a new day. One never knew quite what or who would come along. And so it was that he first heard about Sheik Arry Akbar of Akbar Palace, Camel Street, somewhere in the east. Blue Ted was sitting in a cafe on Bear Street, somewhere in London, eating a bun and reading the paper. Two bears in long robes were sitting behind him, and as Blue was always interested in what others had to say, he listened to their conversation. "Alas and woe is me! I haven't found anyone to fill the position of chief assistant of the Sheik. May he live forever. I shall be out of a job. You'll be lucky not to be thrown out of one of his hot air balloons. I have failed in my royal duty. What will I do? The Sheik will throw me into the Camel Dung." Blue Ted was very curious. He couldn't resist joining in. "I say, you chaps, I couldn't help overhearing, and it just so happens that I'm looking for a job." The two bears looked at Blue Ted doubtfully. "What makes you think that a blue bear such as yourself would be fit to assist one of the greatest sheiks that ever rode a camel?" Blue Ted rubbed his paws together. "Well, It just so happens that I used to work for the Sheik of somewhere in the West, and he was so pleased with my work that he showered me with bags of gold when I left. Now that I have spent it all, I'm looking for something new." Blue Ted mustered all his charm and soon had the guards believing his every word. They agreed to take him to meet the Sheik. Sheik Arry Akbar was staying in the penthouse suite in London's best hotel. The reason he liked this hotel in particular was that there was plenty of parking space on the roof. He had several hot air balloons tied up there, balloons being the only method of transport he trusted, apart from camels. It was very handy and meant he didn't have to check in at reception like an ordinary person. As Blue Ted travelled up the VIP escalator to the top floor, he looked around him, dazzled by all the ornate mirrors and crystal chandeliers. The Sheik was clearly very wealthy if he could afford to stay in a place like this. It came as no surprise to him, therefore, to see the Sheik seated on what looked very much like a throne, or at any rate, an enormous chair padded with gold cushions. The size of the Sheik, however, was not quite as impressive. Blue Ted had expected someone important like the Sheik to be bigger and rounder, perhaps spread out over several couches. Instead, he was rather thin, with a long red beard. With all the food and drink surrounding him, it was a wonder he stayed so slim, Blue Ted thought. Perhaps it was something to do with the Sheik's restless nature. He was constantly looking around, as though something might escape him if he didn't watch out. Blue Ted met the Sheik's suspicious gaze with a beaming smile. It was time to turn up the charm once again. With a lot of flattery, Blue Ted wowed the Sheik with wondrous tales of his work for the Sheik of somewhere in the West, who actually only existed in Blue Ted's mind. His descriptions were so clever that the Sheik was convinced he was telling the truth, and decided to take him on as his assistant. It was not the custom in this land to shake hands, but Blue was invited forward so that the Sheik could give him the royal stamp of approval. He thought this sounded rather good, until the royal stamp of approval turned out to be on his foot. Instead of yelling, "Ow!" and hopping around on his other foot, as he had half a mind to do, Blue managed to smile and took a long, sweeping bow. "I'm honoured to be of service, Your Highness." This seemed to please the Sheik, and the very next day Blue Ted found himself on the way to somewhere in the East to start a new job. The journey was long, but eventually Akbar Palace came into view, its domed roof stretching out over the desert. It was the most magnificent building Blue had ever seen, and he was a bear who had seen many things. "Behold my kingdom," said the Sheik as they approached. "I can see you're impressed. You should be. You are now working for Sheik Arry Akbar. Akbar means great in Arabic, so in English you would call me Arry the Great." His accent slipped a little at that point, and for a moment Blue Ted could have sworn the Sheik sounded Cockney. Being polite, Blue pretended not to notice the accent change and oohed and ahed in what he hoped were all the right places. This was exactly the right thing to do, and put the Sheik in an excellent mood. He smiled at Blue and patted him on the shoulder. "You are fortunate to work for me. If you work hard and see that everything runs smoothly in the palace, you will be well rewarded. In the meantime, you'll have your own apartment and even your own servants. I'm sure the Sheik of somewhere in the West couldn't offer you a deal as good as that." Blue shook his head. It was time for more flattery, he thought. "You are too kind to a humble blue bear, Your Highness. I can see that you are a wise and intelligent man, too." "Ah, yes, that is true. Only a brilliant mind could have thought up something as clever as my halfway balloon enterprises." Blue knew he was expected to ask what that was, so he duly did. "Well, I knew that people had money to spend, and I knew they were bored of ordinary transport, taking them exactly where they wanted to go. I found a way to make more money by giving people less." The Sheik cackled and rubbed his hands in glee. "People get the thrill of making the rest of the journey on their own, and I get the thrill of raking in the gold by providing half a service. Blue Ted nodded and smiled as the sheik went on and on about how great he was. He was very relieved when they reached the palace. His cheeks were starting to hurt from smiling so much. Blue Ted soon found that his apartment was worth all the hard work he was putting in by flattering the sheik every day and keeping him happy. The space was all white, which all blue bears tend to enjoy, as it shows off their colour very well. He also enjoyed having servants, and they enjoyed serving him, as he was very easy to please and treated them well. Blue Ted especially liked that they commented on his extraordinary colour every day without being prompted. Of course, he might have hinted that it was very nice to be complimented on how particularly blue he was looking. He wasn't exactly vain, just very proud of his colour. And it didn't hurt that his servants were very intelligent and genuinely wanted to please him. It was a win-win for everyone. After a year of working hard, Blue Ted was looking forward to being paid his promised salary of 12 gold bars. 1 gold bar per month. Blue thought that was a very good deal, until he saw that the bars were smaller than a camel's toenail. He'd been tricked. At this point, Blue Ted decided that the sheik had far too much money for his own good. It was time for a little scheming and plotting. As he got on very well with his servants, he decided he would try to find out what else they knew in return for a few well-chosen gifts. Freddie, Blue's personal butler, had always been impressed by his solar-powered watch. It was amazing how much Freddie was willing to share once he had the device on his wrist. Blue chuckled. So he's not really a sheik at all. Well, he is now, of course, Freddie explained. He started out in London as plain old Harry Sparrow. He didn't like the way his name sounded, apparently. Harry Sparrow? I suppose he made a lot of money as Harry Sparrow? Blue had worked out the way this story was going. That's right. Enough money to leave London and build a place in the desert. That's when he changed his name. But it was years ago. I think he's almost forgotten he was ever anything else. This is very interesting, Blue said. But why did you never tell me the truth before? Freddie's eyes popped out on stalks, and he looked around nervously. I should never have told you at all. Only, he looked down at his new watch. Well, anyone who talks about it or asks any questions of the sheik tends to disappear. You must promise not to say anything. I'll be sacked, or more likely thrown in the dungeons. Pleased with the information Freddie had provided, Blue Ted promised Freddie he would keep quiet. After all, knowledge was power, and there was no telling how useful this might be to Blue's future plans. Those plans, Blue had decided, included relieving the sheik of a lot of his gold and jewels. Being an honest sort of villain, however, Blue wanted to give the sheik one more chance to pay him a proper wage. One day, when profits were at their highest, Blue decided to ask for a raise. He requested an audience with the sheik, and when it was granted, started on a very long speech. The sheik listened patiently, although, as usual, his eyes darted restlessly around the room. Once the flatteries were over, however, and Blue came to the words, pay rise, the sheik sprang up from his couch and pointed a shaking finger at Blue Ted. Traitor! He screamed, and the room was suddenly full of guards. Blue Ted threw up his paws in protest. Your Royal Highness, I'm only suggesting a very reasonable pay rise, in keeping with my excellent service. Can we agree on 90 gold bars a month? The sheik turned positively purple with rage at the idea, and Blue was chased from the palace by a lot of guards with long knives. 5 minutes later, Blue Ted slid behind a pillar on the other side of the palace, feeling rather puffed. He wasn't used to long-distance running, or running at all for that matter. Now that he was out of sight, he could use his magical powers to change his appearance. Blue Ted stepped out into view of the guards again. Only this time, he looked exactly like the sheik himself. No one gave him a second glance as he headed for one of the sheik's very special full-way balloons, which he kept for his own private travel. Blue jumped in, loosed the ropes, and sailed off from the ground. Now he could safely change back to himself again. Relieved to be a blue bear once more, he looked down as the balloon rose up and up into the sky. There he could see the sheik dancing around, shouting for his guards and cursing Blue Ted with all the curses he could think of. "May you land head first in the dung of 1,000 camels. May there always be sand in your ears, up your nose and down your trousers. May the wind knock over your dustbins until the end of time. May all your meals taste like cardboard. May a hungry crocodile bite your blue bottom. May your toilet bowl be always full of..." The tiny figure of the sheik was still screaming and dancing about in rage as Blue Ted set the balloon's flight path for somewhere in London. "Just you wait," he shouted, although the sheik couldn't hear him. "I'm going to get my revenge." Somehow he would get his magical paws on the sheik's gold, and then they would see who ended up in the Camel Dung. Darwin reached over and switched off the tape recorder. Rabbit was frozen to the spot, his carrot halfway to his mouth. "What's going on? Why are you turning it off?" "Well, I'm rather tired from telling that long story, although I'm sure you'll agree I did a good job. We can start the next story tomorrow." "Next one?" Rabbit echoed. "But what about Blue Ted? How did he get the gold back? What happened?" "Oh dear, dear, that would take up a whole book in itself. I can't put all that in there. I thought my story described blue bears rather well." "But I want to know what happened," Rabbit wailed. "I've actually met the very bear you're talking about, but I've never heard that story." He looked at Darwin reproachfully. Darwin scowled. "I haven't got time to tell every story in full. There are papers in the attic somewhere. It was all over the interdimensional news. If you want the full story, you'll have to read those, or catch up with the bear himself and get him to tell you about it." Rabbit got out his notebook and started writing a list. 1. Look for newspapers in the attic. 2. Track down Blue Ted and get the rest of the story. Satisfied that he would now have something fun to do on one of his days off, he put his notebook away. And we shall put our book away for the time being. So, there you have the story of the original blue bear. There are quite a few blue bears, I'm sure, in the people dimension. Perhaps you've met one. What you have to remember is the blue bear in that story comes from a different dimension to the people dimension. It's very similar, hence you have somewhere in London and somewhere in the East. Very similar, except for the fact that people and bears coexist happily, talking to each other. They're obviously a lot more magical there. Just in case you were wondering how come Blue Teddy and the Sheik were actually talking to one another, that's just what happens in that dimension. Would you like that to be the case here? I don't know if I would. I think I rather like the fact that magic is a little bit more magic when you don't really have it, hello Penelope, proved. If I try to get her to speak now, hello, you see that was me, wasn't it? That was me. But if I look closely at Penelope, or if I look closely at Rabbit, I can't tell what they're thinking. I can tell what they would be saying. And somehow I think that's a lot more satisfying. What do you think?